When The Karate Kid hit theaters in 1984, it became an instant classic, inspiring generations with its underdog story, unforgettable training montages, and the wisdom of Mr. Miyagi. But how much do you really know about this iconic film? From behind-the-scenes rivalries to surprising casting choices and real-life inspirations, here are 15 things you didn't know about The Karate Kid. Imagine The Karate Kid with a different lead, one named Daniel Webber instead of Daniel LaRusso. Or a rival named Donald Rice instead of Johnny Lawrence. It almost happened. In the film's original script, both characters had completely different names, but somewhere along the way, the filmmakers realized they lacked the same punch. The change to LaRusso and Lawrence gave the characters a sharper, more memorable identity. But the name changes didn't stop there. Even the movie's title ran into legal trouble. DC Comics already had a superhero named the Karate Kid, featured in their Legion of Superheroes comics. This meant the film's producers had to pay a licensing fee to use the title, as well as include a credit acknowledging DC's ownership. Interestingly, some people who stumbled across the comics years later were confused, thinking they were spin-offs of the movie, when in fact, the Karate Kid superhero had been around since the 1970s. Ultimately, despite the legal hurdles and name changes, the film found its identity, and the Karate Kid became a cultural icon. Few songs capture the spirit of an underdog triumphing against the odds quite like You're the Best by Joe Esposito. It became the perfect anthem for Daniel LaRusso's dramatic tournament battles in The Karate Kid, but surprisingly, it was never meant for the film. Originally, the song was written for Rocky III, set to accompany one of Sylvester Stallone's training montages. However, the producers ultimately chose Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, which went on to become one of the most iconic sports anthems of all time. After being rejected from Rocky III, You're the Best was offered to Flashdance, but that film's producers went with Maniac instead. By the time The Karate Kid came along, You're the Best had been passed over twice, but it found its perfect home. Even though the song's lyrics reference history repeating itself, which made more sense for Rocky, its uplifting energy fit Daniel's journey flawlessly. Today, it's impossible to hear the song without picturing Daniel fighting his way through the All-Valley Karate Tournament, proving that sometimes, the third time's the charm. Not all battles in The Karate Kid were fought in the dojo, some were almost fought in the cafeteria. One of the film's strangest deleted scenes featured an unexpected food fight between Daniel and Johnny, proving their rivalry wasn't limited to karate. In the scene, Johnny pulls a prank on Daniel by placing a blueberry pie on his chair. Oblivious to the setup, Daniel sits down and ends up covered in pie, much to the amusement of Johnny and his Cobra Kai friends. But Daniel doesn't take the humiliation lightly, he immediately grabs what's left of the pie and smears it all over Johnny's shirt, escalating their ongoing feud. The scene was ultimately cut from the final film, likely because it leaned too much into comedy. While it would have been entertaining to see Daniel and Johnny engage in a dessert-fueled showdown, its removal kept the tension between them more serious. Still, it's fun to imagine an alternate version of The Karate Kid where their first real battle wasn't in a karate tournament, but in a high school cafeteria, with blueberry pie as the ultimate weapon. In 1989, The Karate Kid made an unexpected leap, from the dojo to Saturday morning cartoons. But instead of staying true to the grounded martial arts story that made the movies so iconic, the animated series took Daniel and Mr. Miyagi on a bizarre, globe-trotting adventure that felt more like Indiana Jones than a karate drama. The premise? A mystical shrine with supernatural powers has been stolen, and it's up to Daniel and Miyagi to travel the world to retrieve it. Along the way, they face villains, ancient temples, and even torpedo-riding stunts that make the show feel completely detached from the original films. Strangely enough, they were also joined by a new sidekick, Taki Tamurai, a character created exclusively for the series, though she never appeared in any Karate Kid films. Despite its over-the-top premise, the show only lasted for one season before disappearing into obscurity. While it didn't capture the spirit of the movies, it remains a nostalgic oddity for fans who remember when Daniel LaRusso wasn't just a karate student, but also a globe-trotting hero battling mystical forces. In 1987, The Karate Kid made its way from the big screen to the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, giving fans a chance to step into Daniel LaRusso's shoes. But instead of an empowering martial arts experience, players were met with one of the most frustratingly difficult video games of its time. The game followed a side-scrolling beat-em-up format, loosely adapting both the Karate Kid and the Karate Kid Part 2. Players started by fighting in the All-Valley Karate Tournament, where winning was just the beginning of their struggles. From there, the game shifted to Okinawa, where Daniel had to battle waves of relentless enemies, including, strangely enough, aggressive flying birds that could knock him out. What made the game infamous wasn't just its odd enemy choices, it was the brutal difficulty. Precise jumps, relentless opponents, and unpredictable hazards made progression nearly impossible for many young gamers. Some still recall the frustration of being knocked into water by a single misplaced hit. Despite its difficulty, the game has developed a cult following, with some fans embracing its challenge. But for many who played it as kids, the Karate Kid for NES remains less of a nostalgic classic and more of a digital endurance test. It's impossible to imagine the Karate Kid without Pat Morita's wise and warm portrayal of Mr. Miyagi. His performance defined the character, bringing depth, humor, and heart to the film. But shockingly, he was almost passed over for the role. At the time, Morita was primarily known for his comedic work, especially as Arnold, the restaurant owner in Happy Days. The film's producers were skeptical that audiences would take him seriously as a wise martial arts master. They wanted someone with a more dramatic background, fearing that Morita's comedy roots would make Mr. Miyagi less believable. Determined to prove himself, Morita gave an audition that changed everything. He completely transformed into the reserved, soft-spoken Miyagi, nailing the character's wisdom and emotional depth. The moment the producers saw him in action, their doubts vanished. Not only did Morita secure the role, but his performance became legendary, earning him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor, something almost unheard of for a martial arts film. Today, Morita's Mr. Miyagi remains one of the most beloved mentor figures in cinema history, proving that sometimes, the most unexpected casting choices create the most unforgettable characters. In the 1980s, if a movie was a hit, it was almost guaranteed to have a toy line. The Karate Kid was no exception. Riding on the film's massive success, a series of action figures was released, allowing kids to recreate their favorite moments from the movie. Unlike standard figurines, these toys were designed with karate chopping action, staying true to the film's martial arts theme. Each character closely resembled their on-screen counterpart, with Daniel LaRusso, Mr. Miyagi, Johnny Lawrence, and even John Kreese getting their own figures. Some came with miniature training accessories, making them perfect for reenacting wax-on, wax-off moments at home. Despite their impressive detail, the Karate Kid toys struggled to find a strong market. The competition was fierce. Kids at the time were more focused on Transformers, He-Man, and Ghostbusters, leaving little room for a martial arts-based toy line. As a result, the figures quietly faded from store shelves, becoming a forgotten relic of 80s movie merchandise. Today, these action figures are collector's items, cherished by nostalgic fans who remember a time when karate-chopping Daniel LaRusso stood alongside Optimus Prime on the toy aisle. The success of the Karate Kid didn't end with Daniel's victory at the All-Valley Tournament. The film's popularity led to an entire franchise, filled with sequels, spin-offs, and reboots, some beloved, others, not so much. The Karate Kid Part 2, 1986, took the story to Okinawa, diving deeper into Mr. Miyagi's past and giving Daniel a new challenge outside of the tournament setting. The film explored Miyagi's old rivalries and introduced Chozen, a much more dangerous opponent than Johnny Lawrence. Then came the Karate Kid Part 3, 1989, which brought back a vengeful John Kreese, who enlisted his unhinged millionaire friend, Terry Silver, to destroy Daniel and Miyagi. While Part 2 was well received, Part 3 was criticized for feeling repetitive. In 1994, the next Karate Kid introduced a new student, Julie Pierce, played by a young Hilary Swank. While Mr. Miyagi remained, Daniel was nowhere to be found, and the film failed to capture the heart of the originals. Then, in 2010, a reboot starring Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan relocated the story to China. Though well-made, fans debated whether it should have been called the Kung Fu Kid instead. Some of the most memorable moments in cinema aren't scripted, they just happen in the moment. One of the Karate Kid's most infamous lines, "Get him a body bag," was never part of the original script. It was improvised on set by Rob Garrison, the actor who played Tommy, one of Johnny's Cobra Kai teammates. The scene takes place during the final tournament, as Daniel LaRusso struggles in the match. From the sidelines, Tommy gleefully taunts him, shouting the now iconic phrase. The way Garrison delivered the line, filled with cruel excitement, perfectly captured the ruthless, almost sadistic nature of Cobra Kai's fighting mentality. The line was so chilling that the filmmakers decided to leave it in, and over time, it became one of the most quoted moments from the film. Decades later, Cobra Kai brought Garrison back for a heartfelt reunion, giving Tommy one last moment with his old friends before his passing. What started as a spontaneous line became a defining part of the Karate Kid's legacy. It's hard to picture anyone but Ralph Macchio as Daniel LaRusso, but surprisingly, he wasn't the studio's first pick. Before Macchio landed the role, several big names were considered, including Charlie Sheen and Sean Penn. Both actors were offered the part but turned it down, possibly because they didn't see themselves as the bullied underdog type. Macchio, on the other hand, brought the perfect mix of vulnerability and determination. He wasn't a typical Hollywood tough guy. He felt like a real teenager, someone audiences could root for as he struggled against Cobra Kai. His natural chemistry with Pat Morita also made the bond between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi feel authentic, elevating the film beyond a simple martial arts story. Interestingly, after The Karate Kid, Macchio was also considered for another iconic 1980s role, Marty McFly in Back to the Future. However, he declined the opportunity, paving the way for Michael J. Fox to make film history. In the end, everything worked out perfectly, and Macchio's portrayal of Daniel remains one of the most beloved underdog stories in cinema history. While the 2010 remake of The Karate Kid brought a fresh take on the classic story, it also introduced deeper philosophical elements rooted in Chinese martial arts. One of the most profound lessons came from Mr. Han, played by Jackie Chan, who taught Dre Parker, Jaden Smith, the phrase, Wu Ji Bai Fan, meaning, when something reaches an extreme, it will reverse. This concept is deeply connected to traditional Chinese philosophy, emphasizing the importance of balance. Rather than relying on brute strength, Mr. Han teaches Dre that patience, discipline, and self-control are just as vital as fighting techniques. The lesson mirrors the approach Mr. Miyagi took in the original film, showing that true martial arts mastery is not about aggression but about harmony and respect. This small yet powerful phrase encapsulates the film's core message: pushing too hard in any direction, whether in combat, emotions, or life, can lead to downfall. It's a reminder that strength comes from knowing when to act and when to step back, a lesson that extends far beyond the dojo. While the original Karate Kid was set in sunny California, the 2010 remake transported the story to China, using some of the country's most breathtaking and historically rich locations. This change not only gave the film a fresh cultural perspective but also allowed for stunning cinematography that immersed audiences in the world of traditional Chinese martial arts. Dre Parker's journey took him through several iconic landmarks, including the Forbidden City, the Great Wall, and the Wudong Mountains, home to centuries-old martial arts traditions. The production even received special permission from the Chinese government to film at these sites, something rarely granted to foreign movies. The choice of locations wasn't just for visual appeal, they played a key role in reinforcing the film's themes of discipline, history, and personal growth. Training sequences set against these awe-inspiring backdrops gave the story a sense of depth and authenticity, making Dre's transformation into a skilled fighter feel even more profound. Unlike the small dojos and suburban settings of the original, the remake used China's rich landscapes to turn Dre's journey into something truly epic. When The Karate Kid, 2010, hit theaters, it introduced a new generation of stars. Jaden Smith, playing the lead role of Dre Parker, became a household name, and his co-stars Han Wenwen and Wang Zhihui also enjoyed newfound recognition. But while the original Karate Kid propelled Ralph Macchio into pop culture history, the 2010 cast's fame didn't have the same staying power. Jaden Smith initially embraced his rising stardom, starring in films like After Earth alongside his father, Will Smith. However, as years passed, he moved away from acting, focusing on music and fashion instead. His unique artistic style and social media presence kept him in the spotlight, but he never quite returned to the same level of mainstream success as his Karate Kid days. Meanwhile, Han Wenwen and Wang Jiwei, who played Dre's friends in the film, faded from the entertainment industry. Unlike the original Karate Kid, which remained a cultural touchstone, the 2010 remake didn't cement its cast as lasting Hollywood icons. While it remains a visually stunning and well-made film, its young stars ultimately took different paths, proving that even in the world of cinema, not every comeback story lasts forever. Jackie Chan's portrayal of Mr. Han in The Karate Kid, 2010, brought a new depth to the mentor-student dynamic. Unlike traditional martial arts training, Mr. Han didn't start by teaching Dre Parker how to fight, he first taught him patience, discipline, and respect. His unconventional method? A simple task, hanging up a jacket. At first, Dre is frustrated, believing that endlessly putting on and taking off his jacket is pointless. But just like Mr. Miyagi's famous wax-on, wax-off technique in the original film, this repetitive motion secretly trains Dre's muscle memory, reflexes, and discipline without him realizing it. When Mr. Han finally reveals how these movements translate into real combat, Dre understands that martial arts isn't just about fighting, it's about self-control and focus. This cultural twist on training reinforces the film's deeper message: strength comes from patience, not aggression. Jackie Chan's take on the mentor role not only paid tribute to Mr. Miyagi's wisdom but also added an authentic touch rooted in traditional Chinese martial arts philosophy. Despite being named The Karate Kid, the 2010 remake had little to do with karate. Instead, it focused entirely on kung fu, as Dre Parker, Jaden Smith, learned traditional Chinese martial arts under Mr. Han, Jackie Chan. This created a title contradiction that some international markets chose to correct. In China, Japan, and South Korea, where martial arts terminology is taken more seriously, the film was released under the title The Kung Fu Kid. This change better reflected the cultural and stylistic shift from the original 1984 film, acknowledging that Dre wasn't practicing Japanese karate but Chinese kung fu. However, in Western markets, the studio decided to keep the Karate Kid title for marketing reasons. The name carried strong brand recognition and nostalgic appeal, making it easier to connect with audiences who grew up with the original. Despite the title inconsistency, the film still delivered a fresh take on the underdog story, proving that martial arts, whether karate or kung fu, is ultimately about discipline, respect, and self-improvement. Nearly 40 years later, The Karate Kid is still one of the most beloved and influential sports films of all time. Whether you're a longtime fan or discovered it through Cobra Kai, the film's legacy remains as strong as ever. Which fact surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing facts about classic movies.